Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Health Without the System. I'm Dr. Tim Scott.
And I'm Mia Scott. Welcome back. And our first-time listeners, welcome for the first time.
Okay, well, the little things that people don't see when it comes to the podcast is the last 45 minutes we spent trying to get 7 grains less blurry.
Yeah, it's a process, man.
So if it's blurry when you're watching this, just accept it for what it is, please.
Yeah. And check at the next episode. We'll see if we're better by then.
Okay. So we have a cool podcast today. We have mentioned in previous episodes, we talk about things like sleep, heart rate, stress, and how that affects the body. We've mentioned wearables such as Oura rings and Whoop bands. And today we wanted to dive into that a little bit more. And I titled this KPIs for the body, key performance indicators. We all talk about these in our jobs most of the time, but people don't think about it when it comes to your body.
Yeah, it's odd enough. If you think about this as like your body is your business, you have to track, or if you didn't track revenue, expenses, profit, margins, all the things, you essentially wouldn't do very well with your business. So think about your body as your own business, and you want to be able to track these KPIs for your own body. And the amount of data that it can show you is quite profound.
Yeah, it is robust. So really, when you look at everything going on in the world and all the things we do pay attention to every day, the whole goal of this podcast is to teach you some of the important KPIs that you can track for your body, some of the metrics that need to be tracked, how to do it. We'll talk about what the wearables do. And then towards the end, we're going to talk a little bit about if you don't get a wearable or you don't have a wearable, how you can do some of these things on your own.
For sure. Yep. So as we go through this podcast, just kind of think about it like this. We track your business metrics, we track finances, we track kids' grades, all the things, but we never really think about tracking our own physiology and how that impacts our day-to-day life. So that's what we're going to dive into today.
And the goal is not obsession. Like, we don't want you to obsess over each of these things and go for perfection. The goal is really awareness, as in what is happening with your body. Feedback. So every input has a result. Everything that you put into has a reaction. Same with behavior changes. Every action has a reaction. And of course, autonomy, understanding your own personal physiology and how certain things that you do change it is important to having that knowledge and that power.
Yep. All right. So let's dive in. We are going to discuss what we think the core KPIs should be. Number one, well, there's going to be 7 pillars to this. Could be more, could be less, but it's a darn good place to start. Number one, sleep. This is like your foundation. What it is, your total sleep time, your sleep efficiency, your sleep latency, your deep sleep or your slow wave, and then REM sleep.
Yeah, and this is a good time to let you know if you're into this or you want to learn. This podcast is not meant to be about sleep. We did sleep back in episode, 20. So if you want to go back and hear a whole 30 to 40 minute podcast on all of these things we mentioned, please go back there. But we're going to sort of rehash a couple things real quick. So sleep, obviously, we've mentioned how important it is. And it, like Mia just said, total sleep time as well as the efficiency all play a factor. The things you do leading up to sleep affect it. And we're not really talking about that so much today, but keep in mind how important that is. When we're talking about wearables and measuring sleep metrics, we have to remember that they're not really measuring brain waves like if you were at a sleep lab and it was doing polysomnography with an EEG, but they are using these physiologic proxies, and that's what we'll talk about a little bit.
Yeah. And then just to touch on the data, like I know I want to kind of set the stage. I wear an Oura ring and Tim wears a Whoop band, and we'll go into some of those metrics, but that's what we're talking about for tracking data specifically when it comes to monitoring sleep. I'm sure that there's so many more out there. I don't even know what.
Absolutely. And there's, again, we'll talk at the end. If you don't have a wearable, you don't want a wearable, there are some things that you can do on your own, and we will make sure to go over that. So real quick, what are these wearables looking at? Well, first off, they have built-in accelerometers, and these are basically just movement sensors that will detect micro movements, body position changes, and even light sleep. They will detect some movement indicating light sleep or minimal movement indicating deep sleep. And so that's how it averages what stage you're in. It's not looking at the actual brain waves.
Yeah.
And this alone isn't enough, which is why the older fitness trackers were inaccurate. And some of these newer ones with these accelerometers have more to it with like heart rate patterns and HRV. And we'll go into that a little bit too.
Yep. So it monitors your different sleep waves or sleep depth. So awake, more movement, light sleep, some movement, deep sleep, minimal movement. And then
Yeah,
it'll
that's
track
what I
how
was
long.
trying to say.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
And then that it'll track how long you're essentially doing that for. So for just a quick example, I think they say on average the REM sleep is like an hour and 30 minutes,
Yeah.
which is pretty average for patients or for people. Mine, if I get a good night's sleep, I can be like 2.5 hours plus in my REM sleep. So, and that's how that's, tracking that. So just a
Okay.
second stage.
So accelerometer, there's movement centers in them. There's also heart rate patterns. So during your sleep, your heart rate will gradually slow after sleep onset. It sort of drops down and it reaches its lowest point during deep sleep. And it becomes a little bit more variable during REM. So while you have these accelerometers in the movement devices or in the wearable devices, you also have it detecting the heart rate pattern. And like Mia said, there's different movements associated with the different stages of sleep, and there's also different heart rates.
Yep.
The deep sleep is the low, steady heart rate because you have that strong parasympathetic tone. It's vagal dominant. Whereas REM sleep, your heart rate's a little bit more irregular. You get these little sympathetic bursts, and it's kind of like being awake neurologically. It's a mixed autonomic state, and there's a lot of sympathetic spikes in there.
And go ahead.
Go ahead.
Wearable track these patterns continuously and look for like basically predictable curves across the night span. And then this is also going to help get to know you as well. So yours might be different. I mean, Tim and I's are obviously different
Yeah.
based on our patterns. And that's how we can get to know you and kind of let you know if something's brewing.
Yeah, and then along with these heart rate patterns are the heart rate variability shifts. So again, heart rate variability, which is the difference from beat to beat, will shift and it will increase during the parasympathetic states, which is your slow wave sleep. And then it will also often drop. The heart rate variability drops during REM. Other things that can cause it to drop are stress, alcohol exposure, and illness, which is why if you're wearing a trackable, it might say something like, hey, did you have a stressful day yesterday? Or did you do something before bed? Or are you sick? Especially as it's monitoring other things like your skin temperature and stuff, it will coagulate. Is that the word? Compile
it
that
just
data.
puts the picture together. And then you can actually, on some of these bands or devices, they allow you to track, like, let's say you had a glass of wine that night, like you can add in, I had a drink tonight, and then it can actually like plus or minus points based on if you were good or bad behavior. So like sauna and whatever the case may be, but it takes in consideration. So then it gets to know you. And then when things go awry, which we'll talk about, it'll actually ask you like, hey, did you have a late night meal? And I'm like, damn it, I did. Like, how did you know this?
It does. It's
And
watching you.
so it starts to understand like your patterns and then what your body and your vitals are doing.
Yeah, I try not to give it so much data. Like I want it to work to figure me out. So I don't fill in the little journal things that tell it like, did I have coffee today? Did I do
try to
screen
when I
time before
remember.
bed? Because you know what? That's what I'm paying you to figure out, you know?
Well,
Anyway, so again, accelerometers, heart rate patterns, HRV shifts, and the last thing it's measuring for sleep is temperature trends. So your aura, like your aura rings will measure a distal skin temperature during sleep. And again, just like heart rate and heart rate variability, your core temperature changes. It will drop during sleep. Your peripheral vessels will dilate and your skin temperature will rise a little bit compared to that core temperature too.
yep.
So if your temperature is deviating upward from the baseline, it might signal things like illness, inflammation, hormonal shifts, alcohol intake, late night food, all the things we mentioned before. And then this will help the algorithm within your device refine the stage estimation. And then that helps detect recovery strain, which is another thing that we'll talk about.
Yeah, and these trackers, especially the Aura Ring for females, this has like blown up for people tracking their cycles and fertility windows. You wouldn't believe how accurate these are by just based on temperature. I mean, when I have this on mine, it is just so accurate when it comes to like the cycle, the phases, your temperature changes, and it will literally let you know to the day of when your temperature starts to change. Look out for these types of things, these symptoms that you might be having. Very, very crazy accurate data the more that I'm wearing my ring.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes as you progress. You've had it for a few months, and I just want to say I'm better at predicting your period than the ring is. But
You know you are not.
I am too.
You're
I was
not-
on to the day. It was
Well,
off by
it
a
was-
whole day at the beginning.
Kind of. Well, at the beginning, it has to get to know you. But
Yeah,
yes,
I'm
it
still
does.
better.
It does very, very well. Let's put it that way. And the temperature trends, it also predicted and this actually goes into my heart rate, my sleeping, the temperature, and whatever else it was measuring. But it let me know the day before I got blasted by the flu. And I mean, blasted by the flu.
Yeah, you got beat up.
It let me know the day before, like, hey, something's brewing. And I'm like, oh, I feel fine. And then all of a sudden when I hit the flu, it was like, hey, like basically, are you alive? Because you shouldn't be because of how bad this is tracking. Very crazy
Yeah.
accurate.
So summarizing sleep real quick, again, not measuring like real EEG patterns, but the wearables are looking at movements, autonomic nervous system shifts, vascular tone changes, and thermoregulation patterns, putting that into an algorithm and sort of coming up with a night of sleep. So again, not to harp on sleep, but just real quick, the physiology. You want to get into that deep sleep. You get growth hormone release, muscle repair, that glymphatic brain detox where we talked about sort of washing all the cells and getting the junk out.
Yeah, we talk about that in the sleep episode when you have that cerebral spinal fluid that during that deep sleep, it literally is like a hose flushing out your brain. You have your cerebral spinal fluid that will go up through into your brain and kind of like wash away. Think of like ocean washing away, toxins away. So extremely beneficial. And if you're not getting some of those deep sleeps that you need, you're going to have a buildup of toxins in your glymphatic brain detoxification system.
I agree. And then you also need that REM sleep, which is not quite as deep, but it's very important for the memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and dopamine resets, which we've mentioned, when we were talking about adult onset ADHD and the mimics of it, not having that time in REM sleep, not focusing on your sleep can lead to some of these regulation issues. So sleep deprivation, as mentioned, can raise cortisol. It can increase insulin resistance. It can suppress testosterone. We just did an episode on that. Also think of your hunger hormones like leptin and ghrelin, your satiety, fullness, that kind of thing. So sleep, important.
Yeah, just remember that sleep basically will tank almost every other KPI if you don't have your sleep in check, which is, once again, like we talked about, why, night shifters have a shorter lifespan, and it can really, one poor night of sleep, you can take sometimes days to recover. It's so critically important.
And I will say, of everything since I started wearing a Whoop band, I think the thing it has helped me focus on the most is sleep. I've always been someone who I don't feel like I need that much sleep to function well, but as I've paid attention to what it's telling me about my body and changed some of my habits, I do notice how much better I feel now that I'm sleeping more. And it's told me over the 6 months that I've been wearing it, like my average sleep per night has increased like 20%. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, I still got a ways to go, but
yeah. Takes time.
Okay.
All right, number 2 is going to be recovery and your readiness score. Whoop calls it recovery and Aura uses readiness. So basically, how prepared are you for the day? It represents your nervous system balance, your stress load, your inflammation, and your adaptation capacity. And many things of how it's calculated, primarily from the HRV marker, like Tim said, for the parasympathetic tone.
Yeah, so you got to go into this a little bit more. So HRV is your heart rate variability.
Yep.
That's a marker for parasympathetic tone, so it's telling you what that autonomic nervous system's doing. It's also calculating this recovery and readiness score from your resting heart rate, which is a proxy for cardiovascular strain. So if there's a lot of strain on your cardiovascular system, it's going to affect the resting heart rate.
The resting heart rate at baseline and specifically at nighttime, your recovering heart rate at nighttime.
Sleep quality is another metric that's going into your recovery or readiness score, and that's actually just the recovery opportunity, so the ability to do more throughout the next day. Respiratory rate is another metric, and that's huge for metabolic and stress load. That's kind of ignored, but actually very important. It's based on the acid-base status of your body, a lot of different things happening within your bloodstream, your mitochondria. There's a lot that goes into respiratory rate, and we actually do talk about that a little bit more later. Temperature deviation is another metric that's used to help calculate that recovery and readiness score. And that's affected, like we mentioned, inflammation, illness, food, alcohol, stress. A lot of things can affect your temperature. So the readiness and recovery scores are essentially these composite algorithms, and they weigh these physiologic inputs and they compare them to your personal baseline. And I think that's important because it compares you day over day, week over week, month over month, which is why the more you wear them, the better they get. But it also does use mathematically, it does compare you to the population at large as well. So it gives you the individual and the group population. So,
Yeah, the heart rate variability typically carries the highest weight when it comes to some of this data here, followed by resting heart rate, and then, of course, the sleep duration and how effective your sleep is. Respiratory rate and temperature, they act as like modifiers and adjust the score up or down when physiological stress is detected. But once again, it's putting together that entire picture of what you're doing day after day.
yeah.
Basically, it's a weighted deviation from baseline to estimate autonomic balance and systemic recovery capability or capacity for that day. So
Yeah.
that's what that readiness score will mean. Like, hey, how well did you do overnight? Your recovery. Sometimes I'll have a good night's sleep, but it'll tell me that my recovery index is poor, meaning maybe my heart rate didn't drop until closer to morning time when it stayed resting or stayed elevated right when I went to bed for a while and then didn't fall until almost I woke up. So it'll tell me that my recovery index was poor, pay attention to it, and then things to address it.
Sure. So let's think about this recovery and readiness score a little bit more basically in terms of physiology. Recovery is essentially the balance of your autonomic nervous system. It's real-time nervous system tracking. So if you're sympathetic dominant, you might notice things like, a more REM sleep and not deep sleep. You might have faster heart rate, less heart rate variability, some of the things that are considered more negative. This leads to elevated cortisol. Like I said, higher resting heart rate, lower variability, impaired glucose tolerance. So it's real-time metabolic effects from it. Let's say you have better parasympathetic tone. That's your vagal nerve. That's your lower resting heart rate, your higher heart rate variability. You'll have improved insulin sensitivity, better digestion, better hormone function, lower inflammation. So you want this balance. Like you need a little bit of sympathetic tone, but you'd like to be more parasympathetic dominant. And the choices you make throughout the day into the evening up to before bed are going to affect that. So this helps you sort of, how well did you do that day?
Yep. All right.
All right. So let's move on to another thing that they
Yep.
measure.
Number 3, heart rate variability. And once again, a very, very important KPI. It's basically the variation between heartbeats, not heart rate. It's like the variation between them. So the ability to basically stress and adapt type thing.
Yes. So if you were looking at an EKG, or for anyone out here who's medical, it's the R to R intervals on an EKG. So essentially you're picking a point in the beat and measuring the point to, or the time to that same point in the next beat, and that's your heart rate variability, and it can change from beat to beat essentially. And it's a signal or a proxy for autonomic flexibility. And again, talking about the autonomics, that's that sympathetic and that parasympathetic that we mentioned before.
That's how I think about it in my head, the ability to be able to just adapt to some stressors. And if you have a high heart rate variability, meaning it's variable and it can stress and give as needed, you have a strong parasympathetic tone, resilient nervous system, better recovery, and then of course lower mortality risk, which is just insane that they can track a lower mortality risk based on a good heart rate variability or a high heart rate variability. So then of course low heart rate variability, that can indicate chronic stress, overtraining, illness, burnout, multiple metabolic dysfunctions or conditions. So we want to address that if that's an issue with you.
Yeah. And just because we're throwing around some things, and if you're just listening to this in your car or something, you might be getting a little confused, but I want you to remember real quick, you want a lower resting heart rate. So when you're just sitting around relaxing or sleeping, you want your heart rate to be lower, but you want high heart rate variability. So like Mia said, you want it to be able to adapt and flex based on stressors, situations, illness, or whatever. So just to kind of help keep that straight, lower resting heart rate and high heart rate variability are both good, and they're both associated with stronger parasympathetic tone.
Yeah.
Whereas a higher resting heart rate and not as much flexibility are associated with sympathetic tone, which is your fight or flight, your stress, your overtraining, your burnout, your metabolic dysfunction. So hopefully that just helps clear it up in your mind a little bit and simplify it.
Yep.
Mia, get back to heart rate variability. I got to take a drink.
Yeah. So it means that your body can flex between stress and recover efficiently. So exactly like Tim said, heart rate variability is essentially a window into your autonomic nervous system. It gives us a good snapshot of what's going on. Your heart is constantly being influenced by two competing outputs, your sympathetic, fight or flight, like Tim said, and then the parasympathetic drive, and that's primarily through the vagus nerve. So the high heart rate variability means that the vagus nerve has strong influence. It's able to respond immediately to a stress and adapt. Stress, adapt. So that is how you can recover well versus the poor heart rate variability.
Yeah, and cortisol also plays a major role in this. So
Mhm.
chronically elevated cortisol will suppress that parasympathetic tone and flatten out that variability. It makes it less flexible.
Mhm.
So when that heart rate variability drops, it can often mean that the stress load, inflammation, sleep debt, or metabolic strain is just kind of overwhelming your recovery capacity.
Yeah. Heart rate variability is real-time measurement of nervous system flexibility.
So
So
it's an important one.
it is very important. And the higher stress load that you have, the worse your heart rate variability can be over time. So,
All right, so I want to do a quick speed section here, and I want to talk about what heart rate variability correlates with. You mentioned all-cause mortality. We're going to hit a few things here. Start with that.
higher heart rate variability consistently predicts lower mortality risk across all populations. Like we said, it reflects the autonomic adaptability, lower systemic inflammation, and better cardiac resilience. Low heart rate variability is a marker of physiologic rigidity. Rigidity? Why can't I say
Rigidity. Yeah.
There it is. And that doesn't age well. So that is where you can get that increase in disease processes.
Okay, so that's overall mortality. Let's talk about number 2, cardiovascular disease. So reduced heart rate variability is associated with arrhythmias, hypertension, atherosclerosis, and post-MI mortality. So if you have a heart attack, you have a better chance of dying if your heart rate variability is not good.
Mhm.
So when vagal tone is low and sympathetic or fight or flight tone is dominant, that vascular inflammation and endothelial dysfunction increases. Flashback to when we talked about this before, but vascular inflammation is inflammation or, irritation of those blood vessel walls, and the endothelial is the lining in there, and that's what, when you have that, that's what makes the ability for cholesterol and macrophages and other particles to get in there, set up shop, and create plaques. So this will set the stage for disease progression. So real quick, we mentioned all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease. What about overtraining?
Overtraining is a big one, and your big athletes or people who are hitting the gym for multiple hours. When someone is overtraining or just doing it way too often for their body to recover, your sympathetic activation stays elevated and the heart rate variability will drop. Remember, that's not good to have a low heart rate variability. So that's actually one of the earliest signs, early warning signs that your recovery is inadequate before performance actually declines. This is one of the things that my Aura ring will tell me. It'll like check the boxes. If I had a poor, recovery that night, it'll straight up say, did you have a late night workout? Did you have a late night sauna session? Are you putting extra strain on your body where it's having a hard time recovering?
I think this is interesting too. Patients with or people with PTSD, like chronic trauma, actually dysregulates the autonomic nervous system. So patients with PTSD and other traumatic, life events often show persistently low heart rate
Yeah.
variability, and that's due to sustained hypervigilance and overstimulation of that sympathetic nervous system. It's too much fight or flight, and the nervous system really has a hard time returning to baseline.
It's like they're always on edge and don't have that, relaxation.
Same
Same
kind
with
of thing with
Yep,
depression.
same
Yeah,
with depression.
really
Low heart
just that same thing.
variability is commonly seen in depression, and it's thought to be reflect of impaired vagal regulation and reduced prefrontal control over stress circuits. So kind of the same thing. It
Yeah.
does mirror the physiologic side of the emotional dysregulation. Really important.
Yeah. So, quick nuance. Remember, heart rate variability is personal. A 35-year-old CrossFit athlete and a 55-year-old sedentary business owner are not going to have the same number. And what matters is your baseline, your trends, your response to lifestyle inputs. You compare you to you, not to someone else, though it is good to have, sort of averages across the population.
Yeah. Well, healthy populations.
Yeah,
that's for
healthy
sure.
population.
Yeah.
Agreed. So, okay.
All
So,
right,
real
next
quick,
one.
we're talking core KPIs. We've hit sleep, we've hit heart rate variability, we've hit recovery and readiness score, and we're moving on to.
Resting heart rate.
Okay. So, resting heart rate, this one's easy. It's exactly how it sounds. It's your baseline pulse when you're asleep or you're completely at rest or you're just kind of chilling. And it's one of the simplest, but it's a very powerful KPI that you can track.
Mhm. Your heart rate at rest is largely determined by your stroke volume. So this is basically how much blood that your heart pumps with each beat, and this is that autonomic balance. So when stroke volume will increase, the heart doesn't need to beat as often to deliver that oxygen. which is why that endurance training lowers that resting heart rate. So you increase your cardiac efficiency, your capillary density, and your mitochondrial function in your muscles. So oxygenation basically improves.
Yeah, everything improves, and your heart needs to do less to do more for the body.
Mhm.
So a lower resting heart rate does also reflect strong vagal tone. Again, that's your parasympathetic tone. We've said parasympathetic is good. We want more of that than chronic sympathetic. And on the other hand, an elevated resting heart rate is often a signal of physiologic strain. So infection can raise inflammatory cytokines. Alcohol increases that sympathetic action overnight. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, and overtraining keeps the nervous system in fight or flight mode.
Yep. Chronically elevated resting heart rate is associated with higher cardiovascular mortality and greater metabolic risk. It's not just a number, it's how hard that your body is working at its baseline function.
Yep.
And
Again,
it's modifiable. These things are modifiable. So sleep, aerobic conditioning, stress management, metabolic health, that is, you just want to trend these to make sure that you're heading in the right direction.
yeah. So resting heart rate is really just a simple window into overall resilience, from many different capacities.
Mhm.
All right. The next one is cool. I like talking about this one, VO2 max. Okay. So that's kind of a buzzword, I think, in the biohacking world right now.
Yeah, it is.
And actually, the reason I got a Whoop band is because the previous generation of Oura rings, whatever one I was looking at, didn't do VO2 max. Had I known that the newer one that you got did VO2 max, I probably would have got an Oura ring as well because, it's a little less cumbersome than the band. But
Yeah.
also, we should mention that for the first probably 2 months that I had my Whoop band, I didn't realize, and I don't know if you guys can see this if you're watching, but it's just it's a flat little band. It doesn't really do
Flat
much.
now.
Yeah, but there's this battery pack that goes on top to charge it. And I thought that was like the whole sensor. And so I was wearing this giant.
He's like walking around with a giant UFO on his arm.
Yeah. And people would be like, geez, you like that thing? And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's just how it is. I want to track all these metrics. And they're like, gosh, I think I'll just get a ring. And I was like, well, it works for me. And then one day it like fell off when I was in the yard. And I don't even know how.
You didn't know it.
No,
fell
I didn't
off.
know for a while. And luckily, I don't even know how we found it. But I was like, oh, dang, I'm going to miss all this data. And then like it just sort of clicked when I found it. And like I was looking at my phone and I didn't miss any data. And I was like, son of a bitch.
Yeah,
I
it
do
works.
not need to be wearing this giant bag. I realized that's what charged it.
And I'll remind him that I was the one who found it because I was like, retrace your steps. And he's like, I know I had it in the car and then blah, blah. And I said, that thing is so bulky. I bet you hit it like shifting and grabbing something in your car. Sure enough, it was in between the car seat. But, we're very smart people. And then he had that problem. And then I got the Oura ring and it didn't fit right on my charger. And it took me freaking a month to figure out how to set this right because it wasn't the ring. It was I got a protective band and the band was like keeping it from charging. So moral of the story, we're really two smart people, but we were two
should read instructions.
idiots when it came to charging our data.
Okay.
But we're good now. Okay.
Anyway,
max.
VO2 max. So what is VO2 max? This is cool. This is the amount of oxygen your body can take in, deliver, and use during intense exercise. It's a very strong metric and a good KPI.
Yep. It reflects cardiac output, how much blood your heart can pump in 1 minute. Hemoglobin's ability to carry oxygen also looks at the capillary density in muscle and the mitochondria.
So think about that. So think about all those things. So VO2 max, which is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can take in, deliver, and use. So it reflects cardiac output. So really how much blood your heart can pump in each beat. It reflects your hemoglobin's ability to carry oxygen. So the heart pumps it out. The hemoglobin's carrying oxygen through the bloodstream. Your capillary density in muscle. So once you get into a muscle and you get into the capillaries, the density, how much blood and oxygen can pour into one capillary. And then mitochondrial capacity, which is your cell. So now you're past the muscle and down to the cellular level to actually use that oxygen to make ATP. I just think this one's really cool from a physiologic standpoint.
It is. And it's why it's one of the strongest predictors for longevity and performance, which is why it falls into that category of the biohacking world, because it can really tell you a lot about your body.
Yeah, I think this is cool. Cardiorespiratory fitness has stronger mortality prediction than smoking, hypertension, and diabetes.
Yeah.
So imagine if like you're a non-smoker, you're not diagnosed with hypertension, you don't have diabetes, and you measure and have a good VO2 max. Like, man, I feel like you're on the right track.
Yeah, doing something right.
All
All
right.
right. So then, as we stated, we know
won't
that
do
VO2 max reflects the cardiac output,
We already went
hemoglobin,
through
all
all
that
this,
thing.
yeah.
So what it was low? Well, did you already hit major low signs too? The
Yeah.
mitochondrial
So
dysfunction.
no. I
The-
mean, it's just kind of the
It's
reciprocal
the
of this.
opposite.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Poor
So
metabolic function.
when your VO2 max is low, you have to start thinking, okay, you can sort of retrace the steps. So all the way down to the cellular level, are my mitochondria using this oxygen correctly? And I mean, we actually did an episode, I think, on mitochondria. What one was that? I can't remember. But anyway, there's a lot in episode 19. There's a lot going on in the mitochondria. Think of the electron transport chain, your ATP production. I mean, it's huge. So mitochondrial dysfunction is first, then maybe poor metabolic flexibility. Maybe your hemoglobin's off. Maybe your endothelial vessels are off. Your autonomic nervous system's off. And then, of course, higher insulin resistance risk is also correlated with a low VO2 max. So.
And once again, you can absolutely change this. You can increase your VO2 max because it's a trainable physiology.
Okay. So think of things you can do to improve the VO2 max. High intensity interval training. So HIIT training. Push your cardiac output that higher, and then that's going to lead to better recovery, better resting heart rate, more cardiac output later on.
It's like your zone 2 training for people. I used to have my Apple Watch when I used to wear that, and it would tell me what zones I was, in. So for those of you who'd go by zones, it would be like a zone 2 training.
Yeah, zone 2 training builds your mitochondrial density and those capillary networks. So the ability to receive and use the oxygen as you get down to the cellular level.
Yeah.
And then a big one, strength training. That's going to improve that muscular oxygen utilization. So building those capillary networks.
And making you insulin sensitive.
Yeah. So over time, your heart's going to pump more blood per beat and your muscles extract and use oxygen more efficiently. This is literally training your oxygen delivery system in your body. And a higher VO2 max is one of the strongest predictors of longer life. So I hope that sinks in.
Love it. All right, let's
Number
go
6.
to respiratory rate and why that matters. So like Tim said, respiratory rate is probably one of the most overlooked KPIs out of everything, but it is very tightly connected to your nervous system and your metabolic rate as well. During healthy sleep, breathing should be slow, steady, rhythmically driven by that parasympathetic dominance.
Think of someone just kind of sleeping
Relax.
peacefully and comfortably. That's how sleep should be.
Right.
So if your respiratory rate is creeping up overnight, like you're breathing really fast, that can be a signal of some sort of physiologic or metabolic stress. Think of things like an early infection, like Mia said when her ring told her, hey, something's brewing. Think of systemic inflammation. Are you completely burnt out, stressed out, adrenal fatigue? Think of alcohol-induced sympathetic activation. That's why a lot of people say they have that glass of wine, which might make them sleepy in the evening, but then all of a sudden by 12, 1 or 2, as it's getting metabolized, now it's activating the sympathetic nervous system and kind of screwing sleep up. And then just really accumulated training, strain, not getting enough rest, other things like that.
Yep. Breathing is regulated by carbon dioxide levels in the blood. So when you're chronically over-breathing or hyperventilating, you lower that CO2 tolerance, which shifts blood pH and drives that sympathetic activation.
And remember, we don't want sympathetic. We want parasympathetic. We want the relaxation of the autonomics.
Sympathetic means higher cortisol, higher heart rate, and reduced vagal tone. So over time, this, of course, is going to reinforce that chronic fight or flight pattern, which is no bueno.
Yeah. So think of it like this. Breathing is sort of sitting at the intersection of autonomic control, which is that sympathetic and parasympathetic, acid-base balance, which is sort of this kind of fight always happening within your bloodstream, stress physiology. So your respiratory rate during sleep is like a mirror for everything happening in this nervous system. And if it's consistently elevated, your body's working much harder than it should be, even when you're supposed to be recovering. So I like that one. I think that one's cool.
For sure. All right.
Pay attention to your partner's breathing at night. If you're awake and your partner's asleep, see what they're doing. And especially if you happen to wake up like in the middle of the night and you're just kind of laying there, see what they're doing, 1, 2 a.m. I think that's kind of cool.
And if they're snoring or apneic or whatever else.
When I wake up in the middle of the night, I just get really close to you and watch you breathe.
I'm sure you do, which I don't notice. The house could be burning down and I probably wouldn't notice when I'm tired.
I'm just kidding. I don't do that.
All right. Number 7, body composition. This is near and dear to our hearts because all of our weight loss and metabolic patients know that we are going to harp on them for their body composition scale. And these are pretty cool.
Yeah, just real quick. So I probably didn't put a good transition in our notes, but now we're away from the wearables, and this is just another way to track KPIs, body composition scale. So this is off the wearables for a minute. But these scales use bioelectrical impedance, and they can estimate body fat percentage, muscle mass, water, and visceral fat. So people often ask me, how does this work? And if you've ever had a body composition scale, you'll kind of notice these two little electrodes that you stand on. And what it does is it sends this bioelectrical signal through your body, and it measures basically how long these signals took to come back. And based on, the amount of time for each signal, it can say, okay, 25% of the signal took this amount of time. So that's body fat, because that's how, dense body fat is. And then 13% of the signal took this amount of time. That's how long it should take to go through muscle mass. So based on the amount of time it takes for that signal to get back to the scale, that's how it estimates these things. So it's not perfect, but it's trends.
No, it's not perfect, but once again, the accuracy is based on how accurate you are with it, meaning don't do it every morning and one in the afternoon. Like, you have to be consistent with it. So I usually tell my patients, don't be crazy obsessive, once or twice a month, if that. First thing in the morning, nothing to eat or drink. Make sure that you're decently hydrated, but stay consistent with that status, meaning don't step on it one time when you're super dehydrated, but then the next time you are very hydrated, or ate a meal. That's going to be major skewing of results. So whatever you do, stay consistent with you, and then your results will be consistent.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Hydration is one of the things that actually can dramatically affect readings, because water conducts electricity well, but fat does not. So if you're dehydrated, the current's going to move much less efficiently, and the device may actually overestimate body fat, because it's like, oh, if this is moving so slow, there must be a lot of fat. And if you're super well hydrated, the bioelectrical impulse is going to go super fast, and it might be like, oh, this person's way more lean. So just like Mia said, try not to be parched after walking through the desert for 14 days, and also try not to have drank a swimming pool before you get on top of it. So
just stay
normal
consistent
stuff.
with your consistencies. There you go. But anyway, it also compares you to the population averages. So it can give you, like, ours gives us a metabolic age, tells us if we're older or younger than what we really are. It gives us your BMI, your water mass. Like, obviously, it's not just about BMI and a number on a scale, which is why we love these body comp scales, because you can track the data. For our weight loss patients, as you're losing weight, what type of weight is that? Was it muscle? Because if so, it's the wrong way to do things. Was it more fat, visceral fat? That's your fat around your organs, your dangerous, deadly fat. Those are the things that we want to make sure that when you're using this scale, you're tracking those metrics, because let me tell you, it makes a world of difference when you're on a metabolic journey losing weight, to make sure that you understand the weight that you're losing, because you can do yourself a disservice if it's the muscle.
Agreed. You mentioned metabolic age. So that's something that both the wearables will usually estimate and a body composition scale. So what is metabolic age? It's mathematical measurements. So when you're talking about it from a smart scale, it's taking those metrics that it measures: weight, body fat percentage, muscle mass, and sometimes a resting metabolic rate. And basically it's comparing you to population averages as well as your own self, like if it's, calculating that data over time. So for wearables, it's actually usually based more on that cardiorespiratory fitness, the autonomic balance, recovery patterns, some of those other things that we talked about it tracking, not really just a body fat percentage. With the scales, you might have a little bit more of that based on just your body fat and your muscle mass. But how accurate is it? I don't know. It's not a true physiologic age.
No,
I think it's more of a marketing ploy than anything, but I think just like anything else, it's a good trend. Like if your scale or your wearable gives you a metabolic age, and over time that's improving. Like, for example, I was a little bit surprised when my Whoop band gave me my first metabolic age. I'm 41. I think it told me I was like 43. And I was like, what the hell? Like, how is that possible? I eat super clean. I work out. I'm super fit, but my sleep was killing me. Yep. And it was actually my couple months off when I don't really run or anything. So I was actually more sedentary than anything. I wasn't lifting.
And your readiness score, I feel like for a while was like 30% or something. And to me, if my readiness score was 30%, I wouldn't be getting out of bed. No way.
So really, when you see these metabolic ages, don't put too much into it. I think it's good if you're like 30 and it tells you that you're 50. Okay, there's something wrong. If it's pretty close to what you are, I really would just say make sure it trends in the right direction. And remember, to truly understand physiologic age, metabolic age, you need a lot more data. I mean, for example, more insight into your actual mitochondrial function, insulin sensitivity testing.
But these are things that can give you a red flag that something is brewing. Because of course, if you're like severely insulin, resistant, you're going to have some of these other markers be abnormal because of that insulin issue. Same thing with my females, hormone status. This isn't going to pick up if you're optimized for hormones or thyroid, but it can darn tell you if you're having an adrenal dysfunction issue, and that's going to impact your thyroid because your resting heart rate is more elevated than normal. Like, these are the things that you might not know that it's picking up. So once again, I'm always a massive advocate to all my patients to have all of the tools in your toolbox that you can to know data about yourself. We have the body composition scale, we wear the rings, we do yearly labs multiple times a year, we trend our own body and we compare ourselves to ourselves. And that's all that you can do to make sure that your numbers are optimized. Remember, normal isn't optimized. Optimized is optimized. And just because you have a normal lab panel, doesn't mean that there's stuff brewing that other things can't pick up. So monitor yourself and your own trends. That's how you stay and remain healthy.
Yeah, metabolic age is more of just a comparison metric. It's not a biopsy of your mitochondria.
Right. And unfortunately, if they do it on the average population, let's be real, the average population is not healthy.
No, it's not. It's just not.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway.
All right. So how can we maximize this? Like Mia said, first off, don't obsess daily. Look at trends. I think that's probably the most important thing. And then use these devices to experiment with different things. So if you are let's say you do normally have a glass of wine every night before bed. Okay, wear your wearable for a couple weeks, get your data, get your metabolic age, your sleep score, then make a conscious effort to stop drinking alcohol for 2 weeks and see what changes.
I'm cycling my magnesium L-threonate at night and trying to regulate it to see if it makes any changes in my sleep. So do those things, make sure that you're, like I said, trending your own body.
Yeah. Late night meals, cut those out, see how that affects things.
It just caught me the other day. Tim made me some nachos late at night and I woke up the next morning and it was like, did you eat a late night meal? And I was like, no, I didn't.
No, I swear to God, I didn't. Anyway.
Sauna, that can be stress on the body. Like those are strength training. But once again, you're just getting to know you if you recover well, if you can eat or if you can have a sauna session, I don't know about eating, but have a sauna session or weightlift and you can still recover well, then that might be okay for you versus somebody who recovers terribly during that night because they had a late night training session or sauna, then you know that your body didn't like that and to back off. So
yeah. And also don't be afraid to try stacking. So, okay, I'm going to do morning sunlight today. I'm going to hit 30 grams of protein for breakfast and I'm going to get to bed at 10 o'clock and see, okay, what all changed on my data. Do that for 2 or 3 straight days. So it's not just single things all the time as well. And really and truly just avoid an emotional attachment to it. Like if it's telling you that you're getting a bad sleep score, don't get hung up on that and think I'm a bad person or I'm going to die. Just figure out your body and how to make the changes.
Yep. Or to go to bed earlier than next night. That's
don't get too attached. And like she said, and like we said, don't obsess. Don't obsess. Okay.
Just
what if you can't afford these, you don't want to pay the monthly payment, or you just plain don't want a wearable? What can we do, Mia?
Well, of course, it's more tedious, but you can track things manually. So pick a fixed bedtime and a wake up time. You guys, I can't even tell you how much this actually matters. Your circadian rhythm runs consistently, constantly, and it's the same. And so to have this every single day at the same time. So you have basically like a sleep window. And if you set yourself, okay, let me set this for an example. Have you ever had to get up Monday through Friday at the same time? And then Saturday you sleep in, Sunday you sleep in. Then that Monday comes around and it's like hell getting out of bed. That's because you disrupted that circadian rhythm. So try to go to bed and wake up at the same time every single day. That
weekends included. I think that's
weekends
important
including.
thing,
And unfortunately,
when you do the staying up till 2 a.m., sleep until 9, and then getting back on Monday,
it hits you like a freight train. And unfortunately, we got kiddos, so I have to be up at the same time every day because my kids are my circadian rhythm and alarm clock most days. So, but they have truly made me feel that I'm in sync. And if we have a night where we don't have the kids and I sleep in, those next days are significantly harder waking up because I disrupted my natural circadian rhythm. So,
yeah, and one other thing to think about is your circadian rhythm is based on your brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Yeah.
And that's also what sort of triggers all of your hormones. So if you're screwing that up and you're not getting that right, then you're going to have the downstream effect of all this hormone dysfunction.
Yep.
Okay, so you're tracking sleep. Like Mia said, you pick a fixed bedtime and a wake time. I'm going to go to bed at 11 o'clock and get up at 7:30 every day. And then
You can say, do I naturally wake up before my alarm goes off? Do I feel clear-headed within 15, 30-ish minutes of waking
What's
up?
happening there? Your
And
cortisol awakening response.
yes, cortisol awakening response, which mine was in the gutter last year, and my gosh, was that terrible. Much better now. But then do you have also an afternoon crash? So these are all things that you can correlate. Do you need caffeine at 2 p.m. or else you can't even keep your eyes open, you don't know who you are? Those are things to kind of adjust that sleep pattern and pay attention.
Yeah, and so like she said, if you're asking yourself those questions, like if you're not waking up before your alarm, if you feel groggy all morning, if you have an afternoon crash, or if you feel you rely, then that's sleep's impaired. So even if your hours look good, like, oh, I'm sleeping 6.5 hours, that's all I need. When you're asking yourself those questions and answering wrong, technically, then it's not okay. So.
Yep. And then resting heart rate before you get out of bed, like as you're opening your eyes, before you touch any electronics, before you get up and stimulate any type of response, put your, hand on your
Wrist, pulse.
You want to know something? What time is it? 10:12 p.m. tonight. And my Oura Ring told me an hour ago that I need to wind down for my sleep time. I can't even tell you guys how to take a pulse right now. You basically can feel your own pulse for 60 seconds, count that. That is your pulse. And then do it at the same time daily. Once again, consistency. If your baseline is 58-ish, and then maybe suddenly you jump up and now you're, 65, 68 for several days, of course, that can be a stress signal, inflammation, illness, poor sleep, poor training, whatever the case may be. Once again, monitor your own trends.
Yeah, that's basically a free autonomic stress gauge.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about sleep tracking, resting heart rate. Here's a cool one, kind of getting an idea of your VO2 max without a wearable or a lab. There's a couple ways you can do that. The first one is a 1 mile brisk walk test. So I want you to walk 1 mile as fast as you can without jogging. Record the time and take your heart rate at the end. A faster time plus a lower heart rate equals a better cardiorespiratory efficiency and correlates with a good VO2 max. Now, you're going to have to get out there and Google this, and figure out some numbers on your own, like Google 1 mile brisk walk test. There's some charts that exist. We're not going to walk through all of that. I just want you to have this. You can look back to it, give it some inspiration for Google or ChatGPT. Another one is a 3-minute step test. So you step up and down on a 12-inch platform or something close at a steady pace for 3 minutes, which is not easy. I mean, up and down for 3 minutes that's a workout. But you measure your heart rate for 1 minute immediately after, and the faster it drops, the better your recovery and your aerobic fitness, and the more that correlates with a better VO2 max.
And then the other test that you can do for this is the Cooper test, run as far as you can in 12 minutes. The distance covered correlates with your VO2 max. So
again, you have to kind of Google that stuff online, but it's out there.
Yeah, and that one is surprisingly predictive. But these tests can estimate how well your heart, lungs, and mitochondria deliver and use the oxygen.
So essentially a VO2 max.
Yep.
All right. Recovery is another thing to talk about. Again, subjective but powerful. So this is one, you don't need a wearable. You can do this on your own, asking yourself daily questions. In journal, honestly, we mentioned some things, taking your heart rate when you wake up, you got to put that in a journal. How did I sleep? The questions to ask yourself about the alarm. Same with recovery. Journal this, keep track. Do I feel rested? Am I motivated to work out or train today? Am I unusually sore? Am I irritable or wired? Like these are signs of poor recovery. And I notice irritable and wired more than anything.
For sure. That's absolutely. And especially for females, I feel like we're just more irritable and wired in general.
These are signs of sympathetic dominance, though. And remember, throughout this podcast episode, we've talked about we want more parasympathetic and less sympathetic. Your nervous system will tell you these things if you ask it the right questions.
And then some simple body composition tools that you can use, the measuring of your waist circumference at the level of the belly button. So calculate your waist to height ratio, waist divided by height. If you're under 0.5, it's a strong metabolic target.
Yeah, those are two, you kind of blended those together, but those are two different things.
Yep.
So waist circumference is one, waist to height ratio is another one. And then you were just about to mention strength progression, which is a good one.
Yes, that's if you sorry, I have something in my eye now. If lifts are going up and waist is stable or shrinking, lean mass is likely improving.
So you're getting stronger but smaller, essentially. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
the waist to height ratio, I feel like, and actually the waist circumference, those are both pretty accurate for metabolic.
Yeah. So you'll want to measure those, and you actually use some of that in metabolic syndrome when you're actually diagnosing that in clinical time. So Anyway, those are good. So you don't really need this, super expensive device and monthly membership. You can do these things on your own and get understanding of your own physiology. You can correlate that along with lab work. We've talked about tons of different custom labs to give you some ideas of your metabolic activity, your glycemic load, all that kind of stuff. So anyway,
data, follow your own data, guys.
You need consistency. You need awareness. You need to write some things down. I mean, you got to do a little work, but you can figure this out.
And you need a provider who knows how to run a good lab panel, not just your basic PCP shenanigans every other year.
Agreed. All right, let's wrap it up.
All right. Good deal, guys. I'll mention our supplement line again. We have that on the rixahealth.com. Our supplement line just launched. If you go over to our shop tab, we have lots of things, creatine and protein powders and whey and plant-based, which is our organic line. I love it. Only 7 ingredients, super clean. Magnesium for sleep, all the things. So check us out, rixahealth.com. If you're interested in booking an appointment with us for labs, mitochondria health, metabolic health, hormone health, whatever you'd like, you can choose a visit with us and have a little chat. Anyway. All right. This podcast is for educational and conversation only. It is not medical advice. It is not a replacement for personalized care, diagnosis, and or treatment. Always talk with your own healthcare provider before making these changes to your health, medication, or lifestyle. Our goal is to give you better questions, better understanding of disease, and more ownership of your health. Knowledge is power. We will see you guys next week.
Thank you for tuning in. Talk to you next week.